The FBI slammed Ricci onto the table, but he just smirked. You think this ends with me? Shaq folded his arms. You're going away for life. Ricci's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Shaq glanced at the screen. A single message appeared. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Then his own phone lit up. All his bank accounts, frozen. Shaq's stomach dropped. He wasn't up against one man, he was up against an empire. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The soft glow of amber lighting reflected off rows of pristine glass cases, each housing timepieces worth more than luxury cars. The air inside La Montre Royale carried a quiet reverence, the kind that only wealth could command. Shaq stood near the back, hands in his pockets, admiring a Swiss masterpiece, a limited edition Vacheron Constantin with an intricate skeleton dial. It was the kind of watch that whispered old money and silent power. A low whistle came from beside him. You've got good taste, said a smooth, confident voice. Shaq turned. The man standing next to him didn't look like a regular salesman. Dressed in a charcoal gray blazer, a gold cufflink shaped like a lion's head glinting at his wrist, the dealer exuded effortless confidence. He wasn't just here to sell watches, he was here to sell exclusivity. The man extended a hand. Vincent Moreau. His accent was faint but polished. You strike me as a man who appreciates the rarest things in life. Shaq smirked. Depends on what you're offering. Vincent's lips curled into a knowing smile, like he had already won. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a small black leather case. Unlike the watches displayed under museum-grade lighting, this one wasn't out for just anyone to see. Shaq raised an eyebrow as Vincent placed the case on the counter, flipping it open with a precise, deliberate motion. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was a watch unlike any Shaq had ever seen. A Patek Philippe Grand Complications, but not just any model. This one had a midnight blue dial with platinum casing, engraved with a signature Shaq didn't recognize. Shaq's eyes widened. This is impossible. Vincent chuckled. It's not just a Patek. This is an off-market prototype, never released to the public. Only 3 of these exist. Shaq studied it closer. The details were flawless. The craftsmanship? Impeccable. It looked like something that belonged in a billionaire's vault. This isn't listed anywhere, Shaq murmured. Where'd you get it? Vincent's expression didn't waver. Let's just say, I deal with clients who have access to things the world never gets to see. He leaned in slightly. Ronaldo owns one. The Sheikh of Dubai owns the second, and the third? He tapped the glass. It could be yours. Shaq felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a watch. It was a statement. A symbol of power, wealth, and exclusivity. Still, something nagged at him. Why me? Vincent smiled like he had been expecting the question. I was told you were a man of influence, someone who appreciates true luxury. And honestly, he glanced around before lowering his voice. I'd rather sell to you than to some old money snob who doesn't understand what he has. Shaq hesitated. Deals like this didn't just fall into your lap. Vincent read the doubt on his face and went in for the kill. This is a one-time offer, Shaq. His voice dropped to a near whisper. No paper trail. No waiting lists. If you don't take it now, someone else will. Shaq exhaled slowly, then reached for the watch. He slid it onto his wrist, but the moment it touched his skin, his stomach clenched. Something felt off. The watch looked perfect, but the moment it touched Shaq's wrist, something felt off. For a piece supposedly worth more than most people's homes, it felt too light. Shaq frowned, adjusting the clasp. Luxury watches had weight, the kind of heft that reminded you were wearing something priceless. But this felt like a whisper against his skin. Vincent Moreau was watching him closely, that practiced, confident smile still in place. Looks good on you, he said smoothly, like it was made for you. Shaq forced a nod, rolling his wrist, letting the watch catch the light. It looked flawless. The platinum casing gleamed. The midnight blue dial shimmered under the boutique's golden glow. But now that he had it on, he wasn't so sure. Something wrong? Vincent asked casually, tilting his head. Shaq flexed his fingers. Nah, just getting used to it. Vincent chuckled. Takes a moment. That's what happens when you put on something truly one of a kind. Shaq forced a smirk, but his instincts were screaming. Something wasn't right. Later that night, Shaq sat at his penthouse bar, the watch resting on the marble countertop in front of him. A half-finished whiskey sat beside it, untouched. He picked up the watch, turning it over in his hands. The yikes. Details were impeccable. Engraved insignias, delicate craftsmanship, a smooth, flawless finish. But the more he examined it, the more things didn't add up. First, the weight. Swiss luxury watches, especially something of this caliber, were crafted with solid platinum or gold. This felt off by at least 20 to 30 grams. Then, the movement. He placed the watch against his ear. Tick, tick, tick. Shaq's stomach tightened. That wasn't right. High-end watches had a smooth, sweeping movement, no audible ticking. But this sounded like a cheap quartz knockoff. He grabbed his phone and dialed the one person who knew watches better than anyone. 15 minutes later, Dion was sitting across from him, holding the watch up to the light. Dion was Shaq's oldest friend, a sneakerhead, watch collector, and professional skeptic. He squinted at the dial, then flipped it over. "Damn, bro. You finally went full billionaire mode?" Shaq smirked. "Tell me what you think." Dion examined it like a jeweler inspecting a diamond. Then he raised an eyebrow. "Bro, you sure this ain't off AliExpress?" Shaq laughed, but it was short-lived. For real, though. Dion placed the watch down, drumming his fingers on the table. "Looks good. Too good, actually." He tapped the serial number on the back. "This supposed to be a one-of-a-kind prototype, right?" "Yeah," Shaq said slowly. Dion pulled out his phone, typing something in. "Then why does this exact serial number show up on a Reddit thread about high-end fakes?" Shaq's blood ran cold. "What?" he muttered, grabbing the phone. On the screen was a watch enthusiast forum, and right there in bold red letters was a warning. "Beware. High-quality Patek Philippe fakes with stolen serial numbers in circulation." Shaq's grip tightened around the watch. Dion leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Shaq, I don't know how to tell you this, but that watch is not real." Shaq's fingers curled into a fist around the watch. His pulse pounded in his ears as Dion's words sank in. "That watch is not real." For a long second, Shaq just stared at the gleaming timepiece, feeling stupid, blindsided, played. He had spent years building his reputation, being the smartest guy in the room, the man no one could finesse. And yet some smooth-talking con artist had just sold him a $200 fake, with a smile on his face. Shaq exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. "Run it again," he muttered. Dion sighed, but he tapped away on his phone, pulling up a verified watch database. He typed in the serial number and hit search. No results found. Shaq's jaw tightened. "Check another site." Dion did. Same thing. Shaq grabbed the watch, flipped it over, and inspected it under the kitchen light. The details were flawless, but now that he knew what to look for, small things stood out. The engraving? Slightly shallow. The platinum casing? Lighter than it should be. The ticking? Wrong. Dion let out a low whistle. "Damn, you got finessed." Shaq clenched his fists. "He scammed me?" Dion smirked. "Well, technically, you let yourself get scammed." Shaq shot him a look. "Not the time, Dion." Dion raised his hands. "Hey, I'm just saying. Dude had you in a chokehold with that one-time deal nonsense." He shook his head. "Bro, you got AliExpressed in 4K. Shaq wasn't laughing. He pulled out his phone and dialed Vincent Moreau's number. The line rang once, twice. Then, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Shaq's grip on the phone tightened. He switched apps, opening WhatsApp. "Last seen, 1 hour ago." He sent a message. 2 gray ticks. Delivered. 30 seconds later, the ticks disappeared. Vincent had just blocked him. Shaq's rage burned hotter. Oh, hell no. He pushed back from the counter and grabbed his keys. Dion raised an eyebrow. "Where are you going?" Shaq's voice was ice cold. "To find him." 30 minutes later, Shaq walked into La Montre Royale, the same boutique where he had met Vincent. But the moment he stepped inside, something was different. The sleek, marble-floored showroom was empty. No sign of Vincent, no black leather case, no off-market watches being whispered about in the back. A well-dressed employee approached, offering a tight, professional smile. "Welcome back, Mr. Johnson. Can I help you?" Shaq didn't waste time. "Where's Vincent?" The man's smile barely flickered. "Vincent? Shaq's stare sharpened. You know who I'm talking about. The employee hesitated, then exhaled. Sir, we don't have any employees by that name. Shaq's temper flared. Cut the BS. I met him right here yesterday. The man's expression didn't change. Sir, I assure you, there is no Vincent Moreau working for this establishment. Shaq felt the lie in his bones. But before he could press further, the employee subtly motioned to a security guard near the entrance. The message was clear. Drop it. Leave. Now Shaq inhaled sharply, holding his rage in check. He wasn't about to get thrown out like some fool who didn't belong. Instead, he gave the ma, a slow, knowing nod. All right. And then he walked out. But this wasn't over. Back in his car, Shaq drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, brain racing. Vincent wasn't just some random watch dealer. He had connections, a system. He had operated inside a luxury boutique, meaning either he had serious pull or this scam ran deeper than one guy. Shaq wasn't just mad anymore. This wasn't about money. This was about respect. His phone buzzed. Dion. Yo. I asked around. Vincent ain't just a scammer. He ruins lives. Shaq stared at the message. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A smooth, familiar voice spoke. You should stop looking for me, Mr. Johnson. Shaq's blood went cold. Then the call disconnected. Shaq wasn't just looking for a refund. He was looking for revenge. Vincent Moreau thought he could disappear. Thought he could block Shaq's number, erase his tracks, and move on to the next victim. He was wrong. Shaq leaned back in his car, scrolling through his phone. His contact list was filled with high-profile business moguls, athletes, collectors, people who didn't just buy luxury, they owned it. If there was one thing Shaq knew, it was that the elite world of high-end sales was small, and everyone talked. He fired off a few messages. Anybody know a dealer named Vincent Moreau? Claims he sells private timepieces. 15 minutes later, a reply lit up his screen. Hassan Rahimi. Yeah, I know him, shady dude. I saw him last week at the Bentley dealership downtown. Probably working some rich idiot over. Shaq's jaw tightened. He started the car. Vincent had no idea his time was up. The Bentley showroom gleamed under the soft white lighting, all polished chrome and quiet wealth. The scent of leather and fresh espresso hung in the air. This wasn't just a dealership. It was a playground for the ultra-rich. And Vincent Moreau was right in the middle of it. Shaq spotted him instantly. Same tailored blazer. Same gold lion head cufflink. Same smug charm. And this time, he was working a new target. An older man in a navy suit. The type who measured wealth in generational influence. Not bank balances. Shaq slowed his steps, watching. Vincent had his salesman face on, flashing that easy smile. He held up a sleek, black watch box, opening it just enough to let the man glimpse luxury without touching it. The strategy was classic. Sell the illusion first. Shaq had seen enough. He strode forward, his voice sharp enough to cut through the low murmur of conversation. Careful, sir. That man sells dreams that turn into nightmares. Vincent froze. The older man frowned, shifting his gaze between them. I'm sorry. Do you two know each other? Vincent recovered quickly, slipping into damage control mode. He turned, his expression mock surprised, then amused. Ah, Mr. Johnson. What a coincidence. Shaq took another step forward, voice low but dripping with authority. Not a coincidence. I've been looking for you. The tension in the showroom thickened. A nearby salesman subtly signaled security. Vincent, ever the performer, laughed, like Shaq was an old friend playing a harmless joke. I'm afraid you're mistaken, my friend. He turned back to his target. Apologies, Mr. Davenport, but some people don't understand discretion in luxury dealings. Shaq didn't blink. Oh, I understand discretion. That's why I'm calling you out here and not in a police station. Vincent's smirk faltered just for a second. Shaq reached into his pocket and pulled out the watch. The fake Patek. He held it up for everyone to see. This is what he sells, Shaq said, his voice sharp, undeniable. A $200 counterfeit. I paid 6 figures for this. A ripple of shock spread through the showroom. The older man took an immediate step back from Vincent, his face twisting in distaste. A few other high-end clients turned to watch. Vincent's jaw tightened, but he didn't break character. Instead, he gave a low chuckle, shaking his head like Shaq was some clueless fool. I deal in exclusives, Mr. Johnson. If you don't appreciate what you have, that's on you. Shaq took another step forward, voice deadly calm. You conned the wrong man. Vincent's eyes flickered, a brief crack in his confidence. And then, just as quickly, he smirked. A slow, calculating grin, like he had already planned his next move. You have no idea, he murmured, what you just started. A heavy silence settled between them. Then, in the distance, Shaq saw two men in dark suits enter the showroom. They weren't dealership security. They were here for Vincent. And from the look on Vincent's face, he hadn't called them. Shaq was still locked onto Vincent's smirk when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. His focus was on the two men in dark suits walking into the Bentley showroom. They weren't part of the dealership, and from the flicker of tension in Vincent's eyes, he hadn't called them either. The phone buzzed again. Annoyed, Shaq pulled it out and saw the caller ID. Jared Holloway, his lawyer. Shaq answered. Not a good time. Jared's voice came low, urgent. You need to drop this, now. Shaq's jaw tightened. What? I did some digging, Jared continued. Vincent Moreau isn't just some high-end con artist. He's protected. Shaq narrowed his eyes, stepping slightly to the side as the two suited men approached Vincent. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but whatever it was, Vincent had lost his usual cocky demeanor. Protected? Shaq turned away from the scene, lowering his voice. By who? Jared hesitated. Someone big. Someone who doesn't like their name in conversations. If you push this, it won't just be about a scam. It'll be about power. Shaq clenched his jaw. I don't care how powerful they are, they played me. I'm not letting this go. Jared sighed. Then at least listen to this. The watch you bought? It's not just fake. It's stolen. Shaq's pulse slowed. What? Jared continued, voice dead serious. I ran the serial number through a private collector's database. Your exclusive prototype. It was stolen from a luxury brand's headquarters 6 months ago. Shaq's grip on the phone tightened. This wasn't just a scam. It was a crime. He turned back toward Vincent, just in time to see the two suited men escorting him out the side exit. Vincent didn't struggle. He looked scared, and that told Shaq everything he needed to know. This was bigger than a fake watch, and now he was in the middle of something dangerous. The CEO's assistant gasped, eyes widening as she looked at the watch in Shaq's hand. Where did you get this? Shaq had seen that look before. Fear, recognition, urgency. He set the watch down on the sleek glass table in the private office of Augustin Chassier, the CEO of Lemieux Horology, one of the most prestigious Swiss watch brands in the world. The luxury headquarters in Geneva was a fortress of innovation, security, and exclusivity, the kind of place where a stolen prototype would be a scandal that could rock the entire industry. Chassier's assistant, a poised Frenchwoman named Elise, barely moved. She kept her hands flat on the table, like if she touched the watch, she'd leave fingerprints. I bought it from a private dealer, Shaq said evenly, watching her reaction. A man named Vincent Moreau. Elise inhaled sharply. That name alone made her stiffen. Shaq's gut tightened. Bingo. The massive mahogany door behind them swung open, and Augustin Chassier himself strode in. His tailored navy suit was crisp, his silver hair immaculate, but his sharp blue eyes darkened the moment he saw the watch. For a long moment, the CEO said nothing. Then, without a word, he slid into the leather chair across from Shaq. Elise remained frozen beside them. Chassier reached for the watch, turning it over in his hands, his fingers moving with the precision of a man who had spent his life crafting perfection. His expression, however, remained unreadable. Then finally, he spoke. Monsieur Johnson, you are in possession of a very dangerous object. Shaq's shoulders tensed. So I've been told. Chassier exhaled, setting the watch down carefully like it was a ticking bomb. This prototype, he said, was stolen from our secured vault 6 months ago. Shaq didn't blink. Stolen. By who? Chassier's jaw tightened. That is what we have yet to discover. Elise stepped in, voice slightly shaky. Lemieux Horology never publicly announced the theft. Only a few people in the world knew about it. She gestured toward the watch. And yet here it is. Shaq's mind raced. Vincent Moreau hadn't just sold him a fake. He had sold him stolen evidence. A stolen one-of-a-kind prototype. A watch that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Shaq exhaled slowly. So let me get this straight. You never told the press. You never reported it publicly. And yet, it still made its way to me? Chassier nodded, his gaze piercing. Which means someone within our world leaked it. Shaq let that sink in. This wasn't just a scam. This was an operation. Whoever took this, Shaq said, must have known how to move it. How to sell it quietly. Chassier gave a curt nod. Yes, and that is what concerns me most. A long silence stretched between them. Then Shaq asked the only question that mattered. Who else is involved? Chassier and Elise exchanged a glance. Then the CEO leaned forward. There's something you should see. 15 minutes later, Shaq sat in a dimly lit conference room, staring at a security feed from the night of the robbery. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A team of masked men dressed in black, moving with military precision. No wasted movements, no hesitation. They knew exactly what they were looking for. But something else stood out. Shaq leaned forward. Wait, back it up. Elise rewound the footage. Shaq squinted at the screen. One of the masked men was carrying something. A black leather case. Shaq's pulse quickened. The same kind of case Vincent Moreau had used. He exhaled. Moreau hadn't just been selling stolen watches. He had been involved in the heist. Shaq sat back, his mind racing. If Moreau was moving stolen luxury items, it meant one thing. He wasn't working alone. And whoever was behind him, they were running a multi-million-dollar crime ring. Chassier's voice was grim. Monsieur Johnson, I suggest you be careful. If you found this watch, it means they know who you are now. Shaq nodded slowly. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it feel real. The room fell silent. Then, Shaq's phone buzzed. He glanced down. Unknown number. Frowning, he answered. Yeah? A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. You should have stayed out of this. Then, click. The call disconnected. Shaq's stomach twisted, and then, the screen on the conference room wall flickered. The security footage disappeared, replaced by a blinking cursor. Then, one word typed itself across the screen. Watching. Shaq's chest tightened. Chassier's assistant gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Merde! They hacked the system! Shaq's pulse pounded. His home security system was connected to this same cloud network. His voice dropped, cold and sharp. I need to get back to my house, now. The voice came through Shaq's speakers, distorted, hollow, and laced with quiet menace. Stay out of this. Shaq's head snapped toward his TV. The screen had glitched, flickering between static and a single word. Watching. He turned. His laptop screen flashed the same message. So did his phone. Even the smart display on his fridge. A chill ran down his spine. Not from fear, but from rage. Someone had hacked into his system, into his home. This wasn't a warning. It was a violation. His phone buzzed. Jared Holloway. Shaq answered, voice sharp. Tell me you're seeing this. Jared's tone was tense. Not just that. Your bank accounts just got flagged for suspicious activity. Shaq's stomach tensed. Flagged? Jared exhaled. Frozen. Someone reported fraud risks. You can't move money until we clear it. Shaq clenched his jaw. They weren't just watching, they were attacking. He took a slow breath, controlling his fury. Who had the power to pull this off? Then another call came through. Unknown number. Shaq didn't hesitate. He answered. A familiar voice came through, Vincent Moreau. But this time there was no charm, no sales pitch. Just cold amusement. You should have just taken the loss, big guy. Shaq's grip on the phone tightened. You really think this is how you win? Vincent chuckled, low and mocking. Win? This isn't a game, Shaq. It's a warning. Walk away while you still can. Shaq exhaled slowly, keeping his voice calm but lethal. You don't scare me. Silence. Then Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper. We'll see. The line went dead. Shaq set his phone down. No panic. No hesitation. Then he made his own call. It rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. Shaq's words were simple. I need a favor. Game on. Shaq drummed his fingers against the marble countertop. His jaw clenched as he stared at the stolen watch in front of him. This wasn't just a scam anymore. This was industrial espionage. Whoever had stolen this watch wasn't just running a con. They were leaking high-end prototypes straight from luxury brands into the underground market. And Shaq? He had the proof sitting in his hands. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts and pressed call. The line rang twice before a smooth, authoritative voice answered. "This is Laurent Devereaux." Shaq smirked, the CEO of Patek Philippe himself. He didn't normally take personal calls, but when a billionaire athlete calls about a stolen prototype, he picks up. "Hey," Shaq said casually. "I think I have something of yours." Silence. Then, Laurent's voice sharpened. "Excuse me?" Shaq glanced at the watch, turning it over in his hand. Limited edition Patek Philippe Grand Complications. Midnight blue dial. Engraved prototype marking. A sharp inhale on the other end. Laurent's voice dropped to a whisper. "Where did you get that watch?" Shaq smirked. "Funny, I was hoping you'd tell me." There was a rustling sound, followed by muffled French cursing. Shaq could feel the tension through the phone. "That piece was stolen from our Geneva headquarters 6 months ago." Shaq's smirk faded. He had expected fraud, but this was global-level crime. "You're telling me this watch was never even meant to be sold?" "Never." Laurent's voice was tight. "It wasn't finished. It was an internal prototype. Whoever has this has access to our most classified designs." Shaq's grip on the phone tightened. "Well, I can tell you exactly who sold it to me." Laurent's response was immediate. "I want a name. Now." Shaq leaned against the counter, voice steady. "Vincent Moreau." The line went dead silent. Then Laurent spoke again, this time in rapid, angry French. He wasn't alone in the room. Shaq could hear voices, footsteps, movement. Then Laurent came back on the line. His voice was cold, calculated, dangerous. "Listen carefully, Mr. Johnson," he said. "If Moreau was in possession of this watch, it means he has a direct pipeline into the underground market. We've suspected an internal leak, but we had no proof. Until now." Shaq's pulse ticked up. "You're telling me this guy isn't just a scammer. He's part of something bigger?" Laurent exhaled sharply. "Moreau is a broker, a middleman. He doesn't move watches unless they come from someone higher up." Shaq exhaled through his nose. This just got deeper than he ever expected. He picked up the watch again, running a thumb over the polished dial. "You want it back?" Laurent's voice was dead serious. "Yes, and I want Moreau." Shaq smirked. "Then we want the same thing." He closed his laptop, his fingers hovering over his phone. He was about to message Jared when a second phone buzzed. Not his. A burner phone sat on his counter, screen glowing with a new message. "Unknown number." Too late. Shaq's stomach dropped. He immediately switched back to Laurent's call. "Something's wrong." Then another message came through. "He knows." Shaq felt his jaw tighten. Laurent's voice cut through the silence. "What is it?" Shaq exhaled sharply. "Moreau's been tipped off. He's disappearing." And just like that, the hunter had become the hunted. Shaq leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching the burner phone's screen glow in the dim light of his penthouse. "Unknown number. He knows." His jaw tightened. Vincent Moreau was running. Of course he was. Moreau wasn't just some street-level scammer. He was part of something bigger. The moment he realized Shaq had connected the dots to the stolen watch, the prototype leak, and the underground network, he had done exactly what Shaq expected. He ran. Shaq exhaled slowly, tapping a finger against the table. Good, because this time Shaq wasn't chasing him. This time, Moreau was running straight into a trap. "Let me get this straight," Dion said, leaning forward, his hands resting on Shaq's kitchen island. "You're telling me you want to set up a deal with the same guy who scammed you?" Shaq smirked. "Correction. I want him to think he's setting up a deal." Dion exhaled, shaking his head. "Man, I love this revenge plot energy, but Moreau ain't dumb. He knows you're coming for him." "Exactly," Shaq said, "which is why we make him come to us." Jared Holloway, Shaq's lawyer, sat across from them, arms folded. "This is dangerous. If Moreau has real backing, then he has protection. If you force his hand, his people might retaliate." Shaq met Jared's gaze. "That's why we play this smart. We make it too good for him to ignore." Jared sighed. "All right, what's the bait?" Shaq's smirk widened. "A buyer, a whale. Moreau might have been a con artist, but he was still a businessman at heart, and no con artist could resist the perfect mark." Shaq's team had spent the past 2 days flooding the underground luxury market with rumors. Word was spreading fast. A mystery billionaire wanted to drop 7 figures on exclusive off-market luxury watches. No questions asked. The buyer was discreet, rich, greedy. Someone who wouldn't hesitate to hand over a briefcase full of cash for a deal too good to pass up. And Moreau? He took the bait. The message came through a private channel, exactly as expected. Vincent Moreau, I have what your client is looking for. Private sale. No middleman. Face-to-face only. Shaq read the text and smiled. Hook, line, sinker. The meet was set at an exclusive penthouse suite at a 5-star hotel in Miami. The kind of place where deals worth millions happened every day. The perfect hunting ground for someone like Moreau. The moment he stepped inside, he'd see exactly what he wanted to see. An overconfident billionaire, his assistant handling the deal, and a suitcase full of cash. What Moreau wouldn't see: the hidden cameras, the undercover cops waiting nearby, the silent alert to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, and Shaq, watching everything. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Shaq, seated in a darkened surveillance room down the hall, watched Moreau step into the suite. He looked calm, controlled, confident. But Shaq noticed something else. He wasn't alone. 2 men entered with him. Well-dressed, polished, but their body language? Security. Shaq's eyes narrowed. Moreau brought backup. The buyer, a well-trained undercover officer, played his part perfectly. You got what I'm looking for? Moreau smirked, setting a sleek black leather case on the table. Something better, he said. A one-of-a-kind prototype. You won't find this anywhere. Shaq nearly laughed. The irony. The buyer nodded to his assistant, who cracked open the suitcase, revealing stacks of crisp, untraceable bills. Moreau's smirk widened. Shaq watched the scene unfold through the hidden cameras, his pulse steady, his plan working. Then, something changed. Moreau's smile faded. His head tilted slightly. His eyes, scanning the room. Shaq's stomach dropped. He knows. Moreau suddenly stepped back from the table. This is a setup, he said flatly. The 2 men flanking him reached inside their jackets. Gun. Gun. Shaq grabbed his radio. Move now. The moment the words left his mouth, the suite door burst open. FBI. Miami PD. Agents swarmed the room, guns drawn, shouting orders. Moreau didn't run. He didn't struggle. Instead, he did something that sent a chill through Shaq's spine. He laughed, slowly, calmly, like he had expected this all along. Shaq stepped into the room just as Moreau turned toward him, grinning. You really think I'm the top of the chain? Moreau asked. Shaq's jaw tightened. Moreau smirked. You have no idea who you just pissed off. Shaq opened his mouth to reply. Then his phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. Shaq glanced down. You made a mistake, Johnson. Now it's your turn to run. His blood ran cold. Because the sender wasn't Moreau. The cuffs clicked around Vincent Moreau's wrists, but his reaction wasn't what anyone expected. He laughed, not nervous laughter, not panic, but the slow, amused chuckle of a man who knew something no one else did. FBI agents stood on either side of him, gripping his arms, but Moreau didn't struggle. He didn't beg, didn't even look concerned. Instead, he locked eyes with Shaq and smirked. You really think I'm the top of the chain? Moreau tilted his head, voice calm, almost amused. You're in deeper than you know? Shaq's jaw clenched. You're done, Moreau. Moreau let out a breathy chuckle. Am I? Shaq barely had time to process that before his phone rang. He pulled it out and saw the name on the screen. Jared Holloway, his lawyer. Something was wrong. Shaq stepped away, pressing the phone to his ear. Tell me you got good news. Jared's voice was tight, urgent. You need to get out of there, now. Shaq's stomach clenched. What? Jared exhaled sharply. The FBI just ran Moreau's financials. He wasn't acting alone. He's been bankrolled by someone big, someone who doesn't lose. Shaq's grip on his phone tightened. Who? There was a pause. Then Jared's voice came low and deadly serious. Alessandro Ricci. Shaq froze. He knew that name. Ricci wasn't just another rich guy. He was a power broker. A billionaire who didn't live in the spotlight but controlled more than anyone knew. A high-end luxury investor. A silent shareholder in some of the world's biggest fashion, jewelry, and watch brands. His money was everywhere, but his hands were never dirty. Until now. Shaq exhaled slowly. You're telling me this whole thing, Moreau, the stolen watch, everything, leads back to Ricci? Jared's voice was grim. He runs the entire underground luxury forgery market. We're talking about $1 billion operation, Shaq. This is bigger than fraud. It's organized crime. Shaq looked back at Moreau, who was still smiling, like he knew exactly what Jared was telling him. You thought this was just about a watch, didn't you? Moreau asked, his voice mocking. Shaq stayed silent. Moreau leaned in slightly. You played checkers. Ricci plays chess. Shaq's fingers flexed at his sides. If Ricci thinks I'm walking away, he's got the wrong one. Moreau laughed again. Oh, he's counting on you to fight. That's what makes it fun for him. Shaq's phone buzzed again. A message. Unknown number. Check your accounts. Shaq's pulse slowed. A warning. He opened his banking app. His breath caught. Account. Frozen. Balance. Unavailable. Shaq's entire financial portfolio, locked down. Every account. Every asset. Completely untouchable. Jared's voice cut through the moment. Shaq. He just made his move. Shaq's grip on his phone tightened. His pulse was calm. Controlled. Deadly. Moreau saw the look in his eyes and smirked again. He knew. Ricci had already started the war. Jared's voice came back, low and sharp. This isn't just fraud anymore. If you keep pushing, you're stepping into dangerous territory. Shaq slowly exhaled. Good. Because he wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Shaq stared at his phone screen. His bank account still frozen. The message from an unknown number glowing like a challenge. Checkmate, Johnson. Then he grinned. If they think I'm scared, Shaq muttered, cracking his knuckles. They don't know me at all. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to come after him. But they had made a fatal mistake. They underestimated who they were playing with. He wasn't some corporate suit they could shake down. He wasn't some rich idiot who would roll over and let them win. Shaq didn't lose. And now? It was his turn to make a move. Shaq didn't waste time. He called Jared Holloway, his lawyer, voice steady. I need you to start digging. Everything on Ricci, his businesses, his connections, his weak spots. Find out who else he's scammed. Jared sighed. Shaq, listen. You're stepping into dangerous territory. Ricci's network isn't just dirty, it's powerful. This guy has been laundering money through fake luxury assets for years. If you expose him, you're not just messing with a fraud ring. You're taking on entire industries. Shaq's voice didn't waver. Then let's make some noise. Within hours, his plan was in motion. Shaq knew he wasn't the only one Ricci had scammed. He called celebrities, investors, collectors, people with influence, people who had also been burned. And one by one they answered. A-list actors, NBA players, luxury car collectors. All of them had bought into Ricci's world, and all of them had been played. The moment Shaq shared what he knew, that the stolen prototypes, the fake exclusives, the million-dollar deals were all part of a global scam, they wanted blood. Lawsuits were incoming, investigations were opening, and for the first time Ricci was feeling the heat. The counterattack came fast. Just 48 hours later, Shaq woke up to a notification on his phone. Breaking news. Shaquille Johnson implicated in luxury fraud scandal. His stomach tightened. He clicked the article. According to an anonymous source, Johnson knowingly purchased stolen luxury goods, including an unreleased prototype linked to international smuggling operations. The allegations raise questions about his business dealings and financial ethics. Shaq's jaw clenched. They were framing him. Not just blocking his money, destroying his name. His phone rang, Jared again. I saw it, we need to move fast before this sticks. Shaq exhaled, fingers tightening around his phone. I know. They're trying to put you on the defensive, Jared said. We should push back with a statement. But Shaq wasn't interested in playing defense. No. His voice was cold, calculating. I'm not issuing a statement. Jared hesitated. Then what's the move? Shaq's lips curled into a smirk. I'm calling Ricci directly. Jared cursed under his breath. Are you out of your mind? Shaq ignored him. He was already dialing. The call rang twice. Then a smooth, familiar voice answered. Mr. Johnson. Alessandro Ricci's tone was calm, collected, like a man who had already won. Shaq leaned back in his chair, his smirk widening. Ricci, I hear you've been busy. A quiet chuckle. Business, my friend. You understand? Shaq's fingers drummed against the table. You've got exactly 48 hours to fix this PR stunt, before I make it my full-time job to burn everything you've built to the ground. Ricci sighed. You're thinking too small. Your career is a drop in the ocean to me. You can fight, but we both know how this ends. Shaq exhaled. That's where you're wrong. See, I'm done playing defense. I want to meet. Silence. Then Ricci let out a soft chuckle. You want a seat at the table? Shaq's smirk deepened. Nah, I'm here to flip the table over. Ricci paused. Then, fine. Let's talk. One meeting. Face to face. Shaq leaned forward. See you soon. The stage is set. Shaq is going straight to the mastermind, to take him down once and for all. The moment Alessandro Ricci walked into the room, all smiles, Shaq knew. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The private suite in Dubai's most exclusive hotel was drenched in quiet luxury. Marble floors, gold accents, and a panoramic skyline view that only billionaires could afford. Ricci adjusted his cufflinks, his confidence radiating like a man who thought he had already won. Mr. Johnson, he greeted smoothly, extending his hand as he took a seat across from Shaq. I appreciate you reaching out. I assume you're ready to stop this little game? Shaq smirked, leaning back in his chair. Oh, I'm definitely here to end it. Ricci nodded approvingly. Smart move. Men like us, we don't waste time on petty battles. Shaq said nothing. Because the real game? It had already started. What Ricci didn't know was that every inch of this suite was wired. Hidden cameras, microphones. Every word, every movement was being streamed directly to the authorities. The FBI Interpol, Swiss Financial Crimes Unit. Shaq had spent the last 48 hours working with Patek Philippe's CEO and legal team, tracking every fraudulent transaction Ricci had ever made. Wire transfers, shell companies, bribery payments, all documented, all irrefutable. This wasn't just about one scam. This was about taking down an empire. And Ricci? He was about to be checkmated. Ricci leaned forward, resting his manicured hands on the table. So tell me, Shaq, what do you want? Money? A seat at the table? Shaq raised an eyebrow. That's funny. You really think I'm here to beg? Ricci chuckled. You came to me, didn't you? Shaq smirked. You know what I love about men like you? Ricci tilted his head. Enlighten me. Shaq leaned in, lowering his voice. You're so used to controlling the game, you don't even notice when you're the one getting played. Ricci's smile faltered. Shaq pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. Go ahead, check the news. Ricci hesitated, then picked up the phone. He tapped the screen once, then froze. Breaking news. Glob. Luxury fraud ring exposed. Ricci's name was plastered across every major news outlet. His face, his businesses, his hidden criminal network. Accounts were frozen. Properties seized. His entire empire was crumbling, live, in real time. His breath came out shaky as he scrolled. What the hell? Shaq leaned back, enjoying the moment. You thought you were untouchable. Ricci looked up, eyes blazing. You don't understand who you just pissed off. Shaq smiled. I think I do. Right on cue. Boom. The door burst open. FBI agents stormed in, weapons drawn. Alessandro Ricci, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Ricci didn't move, didn't blink. Then, he laughed. Shaq frowned. Ricci turned to him, a twisted smirk on his lips. You really think this ends with me? Before Shaq could reply, Ricci's phone buzzed. An unknown number. Shaq's gut tightened. Because this wasn't just about Ricci. This went deeper. Much deeper. As Ricci was dragged out in cuffs, Shaq's phone vibrated. Laurent Devereaux, CEO of Patek Philippe. He answered. Laurent's voice was relieved, impressed. It's done. The luxury industry owes you a debt. Shaq smirked. I'll take a thank you gift instead. Laurent chuckled. Already on its way. Later that night, a courier arrived at Shaq's penthouse, delivering a sleek black velvet box. Inside, a one-of-a-kind, ultra-rare Patek Philippe, designed exclusively for him. No fakes, no scams, just perfection. Shaq took a picture, posted it online, with a caption that ended the game for good. Next time, do your research before you try to scam me. Shaq slides the luxury watch onto his wrist, smirks, and walks away. This time, it feels just right.